Something happened. Not the ambiguous, was that what I think it was, kind of something that leaves a person second guessing their own perception for days afterward. The clear kind, the unmistakable kind, the kind where the pushing was real enough and deliberate enough and complete enough that you cannot do what you have perhaps done before, locate the charitable interpretation, extend the benefit of the doubt, find the reason that makes the behavior make sense in a way that does not require you to acknowledge what it actually was. They pushed you away, this time with enough force and enough intention that something in you registered it differently from the previous times, not just as a moment to be navigated or a temporary withdrawal to be waited out or a difficulty in the connection, that your patience and your steadiness and your very Virgo commitment to not giving up on things prematurely could smooth over with sufficient time and care. This time something in you understood it for what it was, a real push, a genuine, deliberate, I need you further from me than you are push. And something in you, maybe for the first time in this particular situation, listened. You moved. And everything is about to get extraordinarily interesting because of it. Subscribe to this channel and drop the word interesting in the comments right now. Because what is happening in this person since you moved? What is unfolding in them in the aftermath of getting exactly what they asked for and discovering that exactly what they asked for is not at all what they wanted, is one of the most energetically vivid things I have felt in a reading in recent memory. And you deserve to understand it completely, not to use it, not to strategize around it, to simply know the full picture of what is happening, because you have been operating with incomplete information, and the complete information is going to change how you carry yourself through what comes next. Let me begin at the beginning. With the push itself, not to relitigate what happened or assign blame or determine who was right and who was wrong in the specific way that is often less useful than simply understanding what actually occurred and why. This person pushed you because they were afraid. That is the foundation of everything. And I want to name it first and clearly because it is the thing that makes everything else make sense. Not afraid of you, of themselves, of what they feel when you are close, of the specific, undeniable, impossible to manage at arm's length quality of what exists between you that becomes most present and most demanding when you are near, of the vulnerability of being someone who feels this much about a person and having that person in sufficient proximity to see it. Fear in people who are not practiced at being afraid of their own feelings produces a very specific behavior. It produces pushing, the instinct to create distance, physical, emotional, communicative, whatever form of distance is most immediately available between the feeling and the person who is causing it, as though the feeling lives in the other person and can be addressed by moving the other person away, as though distance is the antidote. It is not the antidote. Distance from you is not the antidote to what they feel about you. They are discovering this right now in real time with a completeness and a force that I can feel in these cards. But at the moment of pushing, they did not know that yet. At the moment of pushing, they were simply responding to the fear with the only strategy available to someone whose fear has become larger than their capacity to be near what is causing it. They pushed, and it was real, and it hurt, and you moved. Now let me tell you what happened the moment you moved. The specific, immediate, completely unprepared for experience of this person encountering the thing they asked for. Your absence, real absence, not the theoretical, you are still here, but I have created some distance kind of absence that a push usually produces. Actual, tangible, you are no longer in the place. You were absence, the absence of your energy, your warmth, your presence in their daily life in whatever form it had been taking, the absence of the specific quality that your particular existence brings to whatever space you occupy. They felt it immediately. That is the first thing these cards showed me, and the most important thing, and the thing I want you to really hear. Not after a few days, not after enough time had passed for the absence to accumulate into something they could no longer deny. Immediately, in the specific, visceral, way of someone who has just encountered the actual consequence of something they caused and who was completely unprepared for the consequence to feel the way it feels, because they were not prepared for this. They had a theory, an unconscious theory, a theory they never articulated even to themselves, because articulating it would have required acknowledging the assumption underneath it. The theory was that you would not really go, that the push was real, but that you would absorb it the way you had perhaps absorbed previous versions of their difficulty, with patience, with grace, with the particular Virgo steadiness of someone who does not abandon things simply because the things become temporarily hard. They expected the push to create temporary distance that they would be able to close again when the fear had quieted enough to make closeness feel possible. What they did not expect was for you to actually move, for the distance to be real and sustained and yours rather than theirs, for the absence to be genuine. And the moment they understood that the absence was genuine, that you had actually gone, that the push had produced not temporary space but real distance, something happened in them that they are still, right now, in the middle of processing. Let me describe what is happening inside this person right now, because this is the really interesting part, the part that justifies the title, the part that you have not been able to see from where you are standing, and that changes the entire picture of this situation. They are in something I can only describe as internal chaos, not the productive kind. The kind that arrives when a person's carefully maintained story about what they want and what they need and what they were doing when they pushed suddenly encounters irrefutable evidence that the story was wrong. The story they were telling themselves was something like this: I need space. I need distance from this intensity. I need to step back from something that has been asking too much of me emotionally. Creating distance will give me room to breathe, room to think, room to return to some version of equilibrium that the closeness was preventing. The story is not surviving contact with the reality, because the reality, the actual lived experience of the distance they created, is not relief. It is not the breathing room the story promised. It is something completely different and something they were entirely unprepared for. It is the specific, daily, unrelenting awareness of what is missing, of what your presence was providing that they did not adequately value while it was present, and that is now conspicuous in its absence, in the way that only the truly important things are conspicuous when they go. They miss you with a specificity and an intensity that is embarrassing to them, given that they are the one who caused the missing, that they are the author of the distance they are now suffering from, that the very thing they said they needed the space, the less of you is what they are now experiencing and finding to be exactly the opposite of what they actually need. The chaos is the collision of the story with the truth, and the truth is winning. What specifically do they miss? Because it is not general, it is precise, and the precision tells you something important about the quality of what they feel and what you have meant to them. They miss the ease of you, the specific quality of ease that exists in your company that they have not been able to find a substitute for in your absence. the way their interior settles when you are near, the particular quiet, not of silence, but of someone who does not have to perform or manage or be anything other than what they are that your presence provides. They did not know how much of their daily sense of okayness was produced by proximity to you until the proximity was gone. Now they know. They know in the most direct and uncomfortable way possible by experiencing its absence. They miss being known by you. The specific quality of your knowing, the thoroughness of Virgo's attention, the way you see things that other people miss, the particular experience of being with someone who is genuinely, actively, specifically interested in who you are rather than in the impression you project. People who have been known by Virgo and then lost that knowing understand what they have lost in a way that is almost impossible to articulate without sounding like you are overstating it. It does not sound like much from the outside. From the inside, it is enormous. They miss their own best version, the version of themselves that exists when they are with you. The version that is more honest, more present, more genuinely alive, more capable of depth and of real feeling than the version that navigates their life without you in it. They have been encountering the without you version of themselves since the distance, and they do not particularly like what they are encountering. They are smaller without you, less, more defended, more going through the motions. And the recognition of that, the confrontation with the diminished version of themselves that your absence reveals, is perhaps the most unsettling part of everything they are currently experiencing. Let me speak to what they are doing with everything I have just described, because this is where interesting becomes very interesting, where the internal chaos starts producing something directional. They are reckoning with themselves, with what they did and why they did it, and what the doing of it has revealed about them and about what they actually want versus what they convinced themselves they wanted when the fear was loudest. This reckoning is not comfortable. It requires a degree of self-honesty that the push itself was partly designed to avoid. The push was, among other things, an avoidance of the reckoning, a way of creating distance from the things that the closeness was making impossible to avoid looking at. And now, in the ironic way of avoidance strategies, the push has produced the very confrontation it was trying to prevent, but from a more painful angle. From the angle of someone who can now see clearly what they gave up in order to avoid looking at it. What they are reckoning with specifically is this: they were wrong about what they needed, about what the pushing would produce, about their own capacity to be okay with your absence, about the story they were telling themselves that justified the distance. Wrong in the specific, undeniable, the evidence is the evidence way that makes continued argument with the conclusion impossible. And underneath the reckoning, growing with every day that the distance continues, fed by every moment of missing you, accelerated by every encounter with the diminished version of themselves that the absence reveals, is something that is beginning to feel very much like urgency. The urgency of someone who has made a mistake and is becoming increasingly aware of the cost of the mistake and increasingly motivated to do something about the cost before it becomes permanent. Now, I want to speak to you to where you are right now in the aftermath of having moved, because your side of this matters as much as theirs, and the cards are showing me something about your current interior state that is worth examining carefully. You are steadier than you expected to be. That is the first thing. Whatever you anticipated feeling when the push finally pushed you far enough to actually move, whatever version of devastation or despair or the particular grief of losing something you cared about, you were braced for the reality of where you are is different from that. Not painless, not without the specific ache of an absence that matters, but steadier, more grounded, more in possession of yourself than you have been in a while. And there is something else in your energy that I want to name because I think you may not be fully seeing it yet. Something that arrived with the decision to actually honor the push rather than absorb it and continue, that is new and significant and worth recognizing. Clarity. The specific, clean, slightly startling clarity of someone who has stopped trying to make something work and can now see from the outside of it what the trying was actually costing. What the accommodating and the patience and the steady showing up regardless required of you, what it asked of your energy and your peace and the specific Virgo resources of care and attention that you were pouring into a situation that was not reliably pouring back. You can see it now, the whole shape of it. And what you see is not simple and it is not all negative. There was real and genuine connection in this, real feeling on both sides, real moments of something that was exactly what it should have been. But you can also see the parts that were not what they should have been. The imbalance, the times your steadiness was mistaken for unconditional availability. The ways the relationship asked more from you than it returned with any consistency. That clarity is a gift, possibly the most valuable thing the push has produced. Keep it. Regardless of what comes next, keep the clarity. Let it inform every decision you make about how to proceed from here. What comes next? What are these cards showing me about the trajectory of this situation from this point forward? This person is going to reach toward you. I want to be direct about that because it is what the energy is moving toward with a momentum that I can feel clearly. The reckoning they are currently in the middle of is moving them toward action, toward the specific action of attempting to close the distance they created, of reaching across the space between you with something, an acknowledgement, an explanation, an apology, an expression of what the absence has revealed to them that is an attempt to undo the push or at least to address it honestly. The reach is going to be different from previous reaches. Previous reaches, if there have been any, if previous pushes have produced previous returns, had a quality of the path of least resistance, of the discomfort of distance becoming greater than the discomfort of proximity and tipping the balance back toward contact without requiring the deeper work of understanding why the push happened. The return of someone who has not yet reckoned, just recalculated. What is coming this time is different. The reckoning, I described the specific, uncomfortable, my story was wrong quality of what they are currently in the middle of, is producing something more than a recalculation. It is producing understanding, real understanding of what they did and why and what it cost. And understanding produces a different quality of reaching than discomfort alone. What they are going to bring you is not just the return. It is the accounting, the honest, this is what I did and this is why and this is what I understand now that I did not understand then, accounting that the previous version of themselves would not have been capable of because the previous version of themselves had not yet been through the reckoning that makes honest accounting possible. Here is what I need to say to you before that reach arrives. The most important thing in this entire reading, you get to decide what to do with it. Not in the resentful, I finally have the power here sense. in the genuine, this is your actual choice sense. The reaching, when it comes, is not an automatic restoration of what was. It is an offering, an attempt, a gesture in your direction that you can receive or not receive, meet or not meet, open toward or hold back from, depending entirely on what feels right and true to you when you are standing in the clarity you currently have access to. The clarity is the most important thing you have right now. More important than the history with this person. More important than the feeling that is still present, because the feeling is still present. These cards are not showing me someone who has become indifferent, and indifference would actually be easier. More important than the part of you that wants to make this okay, that wants the reaching to mean what you hope it means, that wants the story to have the resolution that the connection at its best seemed to deserve. More important than any of that is the clear-eyed, now that I have moved, answer to the question of what you actually want. What serves you? What honors the version of yourself that finally took the push seriously and moved? What this person would have to bring, and more importantly, who they would have to have genuinely become in the reckoning to make re-entry into your life something that is good for you, rather than simply something that addresses the missing. Do not make that decision from the feeling. Make it from the clarity. The feeling will tell you what you want in this moment. The clarity will tell you what you deserve over time. Let the clarity lead. One more thing. The really interesting part that the title promises and that I want to deliver on directly before we close. What is interesting is not what this person does next. What is interesting is what you do next. Because you have arrived through the push and the moving and the unexpected steadiness and the clarity that came with it at a version of yourself in relation to this situation that is genuinely new, a version that is no longer organizing itself around the management of someone else's fear, no longer pouring its particular Virgo quality of care and attention into a direction that has demonstrated repeatedly and finally conclusively that it does not know how to receive that care without becoming overwhelmed by it and pushing it away. A version that has possibly for the first time in this particular connection put itself first. That version is interesting, enormously interesting to this person who is currently experiencing its absence with the specific force of someone discovering what they took for granted. And to you as a revelation of something you are capable of, that the pattern of this connection had perhaps been obscuring. You are capable of moving, of honoring the push, of respecting yourself enough to step back when stepping back is what the moment is asking for, of being the one who chooses rather than always the one who accommodates. That capability, now that you know you have, it changes everything. Not just about this situation, about how you walk into every situation that comes after it. Keep walking with it. The interesting part is just beginning. Tell me in the comments, did this find you in the middle of something real? In the specific aftermath of a push that finally landed differently than the previous ones? Drop interesting if this reading described your current situation with an accuracy that surprised you. Tell me how long the distance has been. Tell me if you felt the steadiness I described, the unexpected groundedness of having finally moved. Tell me if something in the clarity I described is already informing how you are thinking about what comes next, because the clarity is the gift, and what you do with it is the most interesting part of this entire story. Stay clear, Virgo. I will see you in the next one.